Something was already wrong before the cuffs came out. The first sign was not the gun under the table or the men at the back exit. It was the bill. Mina always made a show of reaching for the bill first, even when she knew I would pay with cash for my courier shifts. That night she let it sit between us, folded once, untouched, while she watched the front door instead of me. I noticed because I had spent the last 2 years pretending not to notice things. In our city, that can keep you alive for a while. I should explain the world before I explain the mistake. We live in Karen 9, a neon megacity built in layers over older layers, half of it legal and half of it useful. The official map shows transit rails, tower districts, flood barriers, shrine terraces, and licensed trade arcs. Yet the real map lives in people's heads. Which alleys mute drones? Which rooftops sell illegal sigil cartridges? Which clinics ask no questions? Which markets trade in names instead of credits? Power here is not magic in the fairy tale sense. It is contract geometry, memory pressure, and field conductance. Most people never touch the deep systems. They use stamped tokens, transit seals, apartment wards, work tags, and licensed tools that do the dangerous thinking for them. The people who do touch the deep systems either work for the city, work against the city, or disappear. I grew up in the parts of Caron where everyone says keep your head down like it is a prayer. My name is Kyle Erie. At least that is the name I use in the low wards. For 2 years, I played poor for love. That sentence sounds dramatic. It was mostly logistics. I wore courier gray, rented a narrow room over a shutter repair stall, kept my hands rough and my shoes cheap, and ran night deliveries through the Canal District on a patched electric bike. I let people think I was smart enough to survive and broke enough to stay useful. None of that was entirely false. I did know how to survive. I was useful. I was just not broke. My family runs the Erie Foundation, which is what polite people call a shadow bank when it funds legal reconstruction projects by day and buys leverage from condemned districts by night. Old money, newer methods. My father calls it civic continuity. My sister calls it organized accounting. I called it home until I left at 19. I didn't leave because I was noble. I left because I was tired of hearing suffering discussed as yield. Mina happened 6 months later. She was standing in line at a tea stall in Floodgate Market, arguing with a vendor over counterfeit ration stamps with the kind of confidence only 2 kinds of people have in Karen 9, the truly helpless and the truly dangerous. She was neither, as it turned out. She was clever, hungry, and ambitious in a way I recognized immediately because I had grown up around a cleaner version of it. She turned to me while still arguing and said, Do these look real?" I looked at the stamps. The ink's right. The microline is wrong. The vendor cursed me. Mina grinned like I had passed an exam I didn't know I was taking. That was how it started. I told myself I stayed because she made me laugh. That was true. I told myself I hid my family because I wanted one relationship in my life unwarped by status. Also true. I did not admit for a long time that pretending to be poor around her felt easier than being rich around my own blood. Mina lived in East Span, 4th tier, in a building with a cracked rain wall and a rooftop shrine made from old signal dishes and candle glass. She worked 3 rotating jobs: betting kiosk clerk, nightclub door check, and ledger cleanup for a freight broker who definitely smuggled restricted sigil components. She said it with a shrug the first time, watching my face carefully. Relax, she told me. I don't carry anything that glows. I should have asked more questions. I was good at questions when I wanted answers. With her, I wanted peace. So I gave her a version of me that was built for peace. A courier. Decent with machines. No family worth mentioning. No degree. No ambitions bigger than a stable room and maybe a legal workshop license one day. I even let her insult tower-bred financiers in front of me and nodded along like I had not spent half my childhood at tables full of them. That was the lie. It stayed manageable until love made it expensive. By the 2nd year, she knew my habits better than I did. Which route I took when I was tired, which shoulder locked up in winter, how I folded receipts by date and source, how I went quiet whenever arguments started sounding like negotiations. She knew enough that when she asked me one night, very casually, "If someone offered you real money, what would you do first?" I answered without thinking, "Disappearing debts. Then a legal roof. Then sleep." She laughed into my shirt and said, "You're either 35 or 80. I remember that because 3 weeks later, she sold me. Not directly. No auction room, no handwritten deed. Karen 9 is more sophisticated than old crimes. People don't sell people as people anymore. They sell access, schedules, biometric traces, habits. A body arrives later as a consequence." The setup was simple enough that I almost respect it. She asked me to meet her at a private lounge in Midline, one of those half-legal places that looks respectable from the street and runs 3 businesses from the back. "Friend of a friend," she said. "Freight work. Better money than your bike route. Just come, talk, no commitment." I nearly said no. Midline private lounges are where small liars meet bigger liars under expensive lighting. Then she kissed me, looked tired in a real way, and said, "Kale, I need this one to work." Yeah, that was the line that got me into the room. The lounge was called Glass Thread. The front was polished wood, blue lanterns, and soft music. The back room smelled like ozone and hidden servers. 2 men waited at the table already. One was broad and silent with a temple scar and hands too still for a normal businessman. The other was slim, warm-eyed, and dressed like someone who wanted to look forgettable but had spent money failing at it. Mina introduced them as freight intermediaries. The slim one smiled at me and said, "You can call me Neris." Nobody in Karen gives a real name first in a room like that. I sat. Mina sat beside me, close enough that our knees touched. Her hand found mine under the table and squeezed once. Reassurance, performance, warning, I still don't know. Neris asked all the right low-stakes questions: delivery experience, route familiarity, drone avoidance, whether I knew how to keep my mouth shut. I answered like the man I'd been pretending to be. Outcompetent, a little cautious, mildly underpaid. Then he slid a small brass token across the table. "Humor me," he said. "Read the mark." It looked like a transit locker token at first glance, but the edge etching was wrong. Not municipal. Syndicate work, or close. The kind of test a real courier might fail, and a trained field reader might pass. I let it spin under my fingers, frowned, and said, "Private storage seal, old district pattern, not active." He watched my eyes, not my mouth. "You're sure?" "No relay dust on the cut. Dead token." He smiled, pleased. "Good." It was a trap, but not the one I thought. He wasn't testing whether I was skilled. He was testing what kind of skill I would reveal for money. Just enough, not too much. Low ward clever. Mina leaned against my shoulder and said, "See? Told you." The broad man at the table finally moved. He set down a paper contract sleeve. Real paper. Which is always a warning in our city because paper is for things people do not want indexed. Neris tapped it once. "Short-term bonded transport. You move a package from Midline to South Docks. No questions. Good pay. Upfront and completion bonus." "Bonded how, Hamo?" I asked. "Routine compliance seal, standard deterrent." I looked at Mina. "You said talk only." She held my gaze and gave me a look I had seen before when rent was due and pride was losing. "It is talk. You can say no." That should have settled it. Instead, it made the room feel rehearsed. I pushed the contract sleeve back. No bonded work. Neris didn't flinch. Understandable. Too easy. He folded the paper, slipped it away, and lifted 2 cups from a tray the silent man set down. Tea, dark and bitter. He passed one to Mina, one to me. I don't drink in negotiation rooms. Another rule from childhood. Mina took hers first and sipped. "You're doing that thing." "What thing?" "The suspicious rich man thing." I laughed because she had no idea how accurate the insult was. "I'm not rich." I didn't say you were. I said suspicious." Neris smiled politely and asked about bike models. The conversation moved, too smooth, too quick. Mina talked more than usual, which I should have recognized as strain. She brought up old stories I'd told her, repeated details she already knew, and once kicked my ankle lightly under the table when I paused too long before answering where I usually parked my courier bike. By then I knew two things. 1, she had already given them information. 2, she still wanted me calm. I set the untouched tea down and said, "What's the package?" The silent man looked at Neris. Neris looked at Mina. Mina exhaled through her nose, not quite a sigh. "Kale." "No, we're done pretending this is normal. What's the package?" Neris's pleasant expression thinned by 1 degree. "A sealed vault relay component." "That needs a licensed carrier." "That depends on who is asking." I stood. The silent man was up before I cleared the chair. One hand on my shoulder, not aggressive yet, just heavy enough to tell me he was faster than he looked. Mina's hand closed around my wrist. "Don't make this bad," she said quietly. I looked at her, really looked. Her pupils were too wide. Not drugs. Adrenaline. Fear. "Tell me the truth." She didn't answer. That was the answer. I moved first, because that part of me was never fake. I dropped my weight, twisted out from under the big man's hand, drove my elbow into his ribs, and kicked the table leg sideways. Tea, glass, and the brass tokens skidded across the floor. Neris cursed and reached inside his coat. Mina jerked back from the spill, eyes wide. Not surprised I fought. Surprised how hard. The backroom door opened before I hit it. 2 more men came in, one with a restraint wand, one with a portable seal frame folded like a metal fan. Not freight intermediaries. Capture team. The fan snapped open with a metallic clap and lit blue at the hinges. I stopped. And if you have never seen a live snap frame seal deployed at close range, picture a cage made of legal geometry and shock current. It does not need to touch you to make your nerves think it did. They use them for debt extractions, illicit field users, and sometimes animals too large for tranquilizers. Neris had a gun in his hand now, compact and dull black, aimed low at my stomach. Professional, practical. "Sit down." I looked at Mina. Her mouth was set hard, but her eyes were shaking. "Please," she said. That word almost worked. Then I saw the payout slate on the side credenza, still active from a recent transfer. Split disbursement lines. One tagged to Mina's kiosk identity. One to a shell co-op I recognized from old Irie risk briefings. Ash Thread Logistics. Not freight. Syndicate laundering arm. Mid-tier. Violent when efficient. My stomach dropped in a way no weapon had managed. "How much?" I asked her. "Kale." "How much?" Neris answered for her. Well, calm again now that the frame had me boxed. Enough to clear 3 family debts and buy a move permit out of East Span. Mina flinched like he had hit her. I looked from him to her and understood the shape of it all at once. She had not sold me because she hated me. She had sold me because someone offered her a future and told her I was the price. In Quran 9, that is common enough to be boring. It still felt like being skinned. "What did you tell them I was?" I asked. Her voice came out rough. "A courier with clean roots and no one to look for him." The irony almost made me laugh. No one to look for him. My father had private trackers on 3 continents and a crisis unit that could shut down half the lower financial grid for less. But the man I had chosen to be? She was right. That man had no one. Neris lowered the gun slightly and nodded toward the frame operators. "Restrain him intact. Buyer wants live biometric confirmation." Buyer. So Mina had sold access, and Ash Thread had sold me again upstream. That was the moment a very old part of my life came back online. I stopped thinking like a courier and started thinking like an Irie. First rule: if you are already in a trap, identify the invoice path. Money trails reveal hierarchy faster than threats. Second rule: fear is useful if you assign it a task. Third rule: no one in a paid room expects the poorest man there to understand capital structure. I raised both hands slowly. "No need to fry me, I'll sit." The big man pressed me into the chair again. The snap frame stayed open at my side, humming. One operator moved behind me with restraint loops. Neris stepped closer, gun still visible. Mina stood frozen near the wall, one hand wet with spilled tea, staring at me like she wanted me to shout at her because that would make her job easier. Instead, I asked Neris, "Who's the buyer?" He smiled. "No." "Yeah, then at least let me know if I'm being sold for debt labor or parts. I'd like to calibrate my disappointment." The silent man barked a short laugh before catching himself. Neris watched me for a second too long. "You're not heading to a chop clinic?" "Comforting." He signaled the operator behind me. I felt the restraint loop tighten around my wrists. Conductive fiber, mid-grade. Cheap enough to cut corners, good enough to hurt. The snap frame angled inward. Blue lines crawled across the metal hinges, sinking to my pulse. Bad design. Pulse sync on a portable rig in a neon-heavy district means interference risk if the operator is lazy. I filed that away. Neris lifted a seal stamp from his pocket, thumb-sized, hexagonal, and pressed it to the paper contract sleeve. The sleeve flared once, lines of script appearing and locking into place. Capture authorization, transit handoff, provisional custody. He was building a legal shell around a kidnapping in real time. Karen 9. Again. If the paperwork glows, half the city looks away. He looked at me. Last chance to cooperate without pain. I leaned back as far as the restraints allowed and said, "You people always say that like pain isn't already budgeted." That got me a look from Mina. Hurt, anger, maybe shame. Hard to tell. Human reactions blur under fluorescent blue and bad decisions. The operator behind me tightened the loops until my hands numbed. Neris turned to Mina and slid a smaller slate across the table. "Confirm face and voice statement." She stared at it. I already did. Buyer requested live confirmation. She looked at me, then at the slate. The prompt on screen was simple. Voluntary association statement. Last seen declaration, no coercion observed. Enough to muddy a missing person search for 48 hours. She picked it up with both hands. Her voice shook on the first word and steadied by force. "My name is Mina Serene. I confirm Kale Erie left glass thread on freelance work by choice. No violence occurred on site. Payment dispute resolved." Neris nodded, satisfied. I watched her say it. I looked at her across the smoke and red light and said, "Who is the buyer?" She shook her head, crying now and furious about it. "I don't know the name, I swear. Ash Thread said the collector. South Basin transfer. Midnight." Neris came through the smoke with the gun raised and no expression left at all. Mina moved in front of me. I still don't know if she chose me or just reacted to the barrel. The shot cracked. She spun and hit the floor hard, not dead, shoulder hit, blood already darkening her sleeve. Everything after that happened too fast and too clearly. I threw the dead power pack at Neris's face. It hit his cheekbone. He staggered. I crossed the distance, caught his gun wrist and drove him backward into the burning table. The contract smoke turned thicker, green-gray, stinging my eyes. He tried to bring up a backup blade, and I slammed his wrist against the table edge until the blade dropped, then put his head through the frosted glass wall. Somewhere in the building, a bass surge from the front lounge music overloaded a local line and fed back through the cheap isolation grid. Bad luck for them. Excellent timing for me. I ripped my right hand free, grabbed the operator's wrist, and drove his reset hand straight into the live hinge bank. The snap frame collapsed sideways in a burst of blue arcs. The operator screamed. The big man lunged. I kicked the table up into his knees, twisted the restraint cord around the chair leg, and dragged the power pack off the operator's belt. Neris fired once. The shot tore through the hanging lantern behind me and showered glass over the wall. Mina ducked and yelled my name. I don't know if she was warning me or warning them. I hit the floor, rolled behind the credenza, and jammed the power pack against the payout slate. Sparks jumped. E-screens died. Room lights dropped to emergency red. In red light, training matters more than plans. The big man moved toward sound, not sight. Good instinct. I threw the brass token across the room. It clattered near the side door. He turned. I came up behind him, wrapped the restraint cord across his throat, and drove him into the doorframe. He hit hard, elbowing back blindly. I took one to the ribs and nearly lost my grip. Neris fired again. The shot hit the contract sleeve on the table. The paper ignited green and filled the room with chemical smoke. Someone shouted from the hall, "Security drone inbound!" That was new. Glass Thread's owners were either panicking or pretending to. Mina appeared through the smoke, crouched, eyes streaming, one hand over her mouth. She looked at me and saw, really saw, something she had not expected. Not just a courier who fought, a man moving through chaos like he had been taught. "Kale," she said, voice breaking. "They said they'd only hold you." "They said." I dragged the big man's gun hand into the doorframe and felt something pop. He went down cursing. The room went quiet except for alarms and Mina gasping. The drone arrived at the hall door, lens glowing. Speaker issuing the standard line about licensed force and property compliance. I grabbed Neris's seal stamp, his gun, and the half-burned contract sleeve, kicked open the side service door, and crouched by Mina. Her teeth were clenched so hard I thought she might crack one. "Can you move?" I asked. She laughed once, wet and angry. "Now you ask me questions." Blood was pumping but not spraying. Shoulder, not chest. Painful, survivable if she got stitched. "Who is the collector?" I asked again. She swallowed hard. "I don't know. Ash Thread uses him for live transfers. Special buyers. People with skills, clean organs, weird biometrics, debt leverage, whatever pays. They said you matched a request. They scanned your root cam from the old bridge and flagged you." Root cam. I went cold. My courier bike helmet had a cheap dash cam. I used it for crash disputes and delivery proof. Last week, I had ridden past an illegal ability market raid in Shrine Row, and without thinking, reflex mapped a collapsing seal gate to avoid being crushed. A normal courier wouldn't have seen the pattern fast enough. I did. Someone reviewed the footage. Someone noticed. They weren't buying a courier. They were buying a field reader hiding in plain sight. Mina grabbed my sleeve. "Kale, listen to me. If you run to the ward stations, Ash Thread already filed a bonded dispute. They'll paint you as violent debt theft. You need to disappear before midnight." The drone speaker in the hallway repeated its warning, louder now. Secondary drone rotor noise joined it. I looked at Mina, bleeding on the floor, because she sold me and then stepped into a bullet she may not have meant to catch. Human messiness. No neat category, no clean emotion. You should have asked me," I said. She shut her eyes like that hurt more than the wound. "I know. I should have left her. Efficient choice. Safer choice." Instead, I dragged her up under my arm and took her through the service corridor. The side passage led into a liquor storage shaft, then down a trash chute ladder to a loading lane that smelled like rain, engine coolant, and old fish. Neon from midline signage painted the puddles violet. Above us, drones swept the alley mouth with white beams. Mina was half-conscious by then, trying not to make noise and failing in small, furious sounds. My cheap courier bike was gone. Of course it was. They'd planned the whole handoff. At the far end of the lane, a boy I knew from night deliveries, Tavi, 14, all elbows and bad posture, was smoking under a vent hood beside a stack of illegal battery cells. He saw me, saw the gun, saw Mina bleeding, and immediately dropped the cigarette. "I did not see anything," he said. "Good," I said. "I need a ride." He stared at Mina. "That's expensive blood." "I know." He looked up at the drones, then back at me, doing the math all low-word kids do faster than adults. Risk versus future favor. His answer came in 2 seconds. "Not on street level. Come on." He led us through a maintenance hatch into the underside of Midline's old tram catwalks, where the city hums through rust and cable bundles, and nobody respectable goes unless paying for something unregistered. He had a stripped-down service scooter hidden behind a transformer shield, and a route through utility ducts that bypassed 3 drone checkpoints and 1 licensed gang toll. I did not ask how he knew it. I just helped Mina onto the scooter and held her upright, while Tavi drove like he had been born in machinery. As we cut through the dark between neon districts, and I checked Neris's seal stamp and the half-burned contract sleeve under a maintenance light. The sleeve was damaged but readable in parts, enough to matter. Transfer node, South Basin/Pier 19, interim holder, Ash Thread Logistics. Final claimant, Cinder Vault Acquisitions, subject classification, unregistered aptitude/response tier pending delivery window, 2340 to 0010 Cinder Vault. Not a street gang, not a simple syndicate arm, an acquisition house. My family had briefed on them once in a closed session I was not supposed to attend. Quiet bidders, high-end trafficking through legal shells. They bought people the way old firms bought patents, through debt seizures, custody disputes, bounty enforcement, private arbitration. They specialized in irregular assets, which was the kind of phrase rich men use when they mean human beings with useful abnormalities. Mina shifted against me, fever rising already. What is it? I folded the sleeve. Bad. She made a weak sound that might have been a laugh. I guessed. Tavi shouted over the scooter whine. Where am I taking you? Good question. Every safe option collapsed at once. If I went home to my fake room, Ash Thread would be waiting. If I called City Ward Security, the bonded dispute shell would trigger, and I'd be tagged as violent breach in a private contract zone. If I called my family, the Irie Foundation would come hard, loud, and public, and every reason I had hidden my name in the first place would arrive in armored cars. I looked at Mina's blood on my sleeve, at the contract naming Cinder Vault, at the gun in my hand I did not want, and made the kind of decision that changes the shape of a story before you know the cost. Shrine Row lower roofs, I said. Old signal gardens. Tavi glanced back, startled. That place is dead. Not all of it. There was someone there I had not seen in 3 years. Someone who used to teach field pattern analysis at my father's private table until he called the foundation a cannibal institution and walked out mid-contract. My father called him unstable. My sister called him dangerous. I called him the only adult in that house who ever answered my questions directly. Master Oren, if he was still alive, would know what Cinder Vault wanted with an unregistered aptitude flagged off a courier route cam. He might also kill me for bringing trouble to his roof. At that point, those were both better odds than midnight at South Basin. We rode under the city while alarms spread above us, and my old life started moving toward me from directions I had spent 2 years avoiding. Mina bled against my shoulder, half conscious and stubborn. Tavi drove through utility dark like a rat prince. In my pocket, Neris's seal stamp warmed against my palm as if it still held a charge. By the time the scooter climbed the final access ramp toward the dead shrine antennas of Lower Shrine Row, I understood the part that mattered. I had pretended to be poor so someone would love me without a ledger. Instead, a syndicate found my value first. By the time we reached the Lower Shrine roofs, Mina was shivering hard enough to shake the scooter frame. Shrine Row used to be ceremonial. Before the flood barriers went up, and the city sold half its old religious terraces to telecom contractors. People came there at dawn with incense, petitions, and family names written on paper strips. Then the antennas came. Then the illegal markets came. Then the raids. What was left after that was steel lattice, cracked tiles, prayer bells wired into signal repeaters, and a maze of rooftop bridges everyone called dead because admitting they were still active made you responsible for what happened there. Tavi killed the scooter lights 3 blocks out and coasted us in under a collapsed relay arm. I'm not going up, he said. No offense. I like living long enough to be rude tomorrow. Oh, fair, I said. His eyes flicked to Mina, to the blood on my sleeve, then to the gun. If anybody asks, I was at my aunt's with soup. You don't have an aunt. I might by morning. He handed me a patch cable and a cheap med foam spray from his jacket. For the shoulder, don't use too much. It seals ugly. Then he was gone, scooter whining low through the utility cut. I stood alone with Mina under the skeletal shadow of old signal dishes and felt the city above and below us moving like a machine that had just noticed a missing part. Mina made a sound through clenched teeth. Kale. Yeah. If this is where you dump me, I deserve it. Don't talk. Not exactly a promise. I got her arm over my shoulders and climbed. The path to Oren's roof wasn't on any map. It was a sequence of bad decisions remembered in the right order. Broken stairwell, rust ladder, half-collapsed walkway, narrow span over a 10-story drop. Then a blind turn behind a shrine facade where the air changed and the drone noise got quieter. Oren had woven low-tech interference through the old architecture years ago. Wind chimes cut to disrupt acoustic mapping, mirrored prayer plates to scramble line-of-sight scans, copper mesh under the tiles to bend cheap field sweeps. He used to call it teaching the city to look away. The door at the top was still there. Metal, paint burned off, no handle outside. I knocked once, then twice, then 3 short taps. No answer. I waited, listening to Mina breathe. Then I said, "Master Oren, if you're dead, I'm sorry for the noise. If you're alive, I brought trouble and 1 gunshot wound." Locks shifted inside. The door opened 4 centimeters. One eye looked out, old, sharp, irritated. "Still speaking before thinking," Oren said. "Good. Means you haven't become your father." He opened the door fully and took in the scene in one sweep. Blood, gun, Mina, the seal burn on my wrist, the contract sleeve in my pocket corner. His expression flattened. Inside, fast. Oren's place looked exactly like memory and nothing like it. The roof greenhouse was gone, replaced by a workshop of hanging cables, salvaged relay cores, paper archives and sealed crates, and 1 narrow cot beside a stove made from an old compressor shell. Lanterns glowed amber under shielding glass. Sigils were etched everywhere, but not decorative. Practical marks on thresholds, shelves, vents, and water pipes. Containment, dampening, misdirection. He pointed to a steel table. "Her there." Mina tensed. "No clinics." "No clinic," he said. "If I wanted you reported, I'd have opened the door slower." That actually made her laugh, then hiss in pain when I laid her down. Oren cut her jacket sleeve with a ceramic blade, checked the wound, and grunted. "Through and through shoulder. Lucky line, ugly, but lucky. Kale, hot water. Top shelf red kit, not the blue one." I moved automatically, old reflex. He used to assign tasks while explaining theory and then insult your technique as a teaching method. Mina watched us through a haze of pain and suspicion. "You know him." Oren didn't look up. "Unfortunately." While I boiled water and found the med kit, he sprayed local numb foam around the wound, flushed it, and stitched with fast, brutal precision. Mina bit down on a rolled cloth and swore in 3 languages. He approved of her profanity, but not her breathing rhythm, and told her so. When he sealed the dressing, he finally looked at me. "Now, start with the part where you ignored every survival instinct and brought a Syndicate trail to my roof." I gave him the short version first. Glass thread, Mina's setup, ash thread, Neris, the snap frame, the contract sleeve, Cinder Vault, South Basin Midnight Transfer. At Cinder Vault, Oren stopped cleaning his hands and went completely still. "That name appears on paper only when someone is already bought," he said. I figured. "No, you figured bad. This is more specific." He held out his hand. I passed him the burned contract sleeve and seal stamp. He checked both under a magnifier lamp, then set the stamp on a ceramic dish inscribed with null lines. The stamp sparked once and dimmed. "It's genuine," he said. "Mid-tier ash thread authority, single-use capture chain. Cinder Vault claimant code masked, but not entirely. They were buying you for assessment, not immediate disposal." Mina, pale and sweating, said, "I told you they wanted him alive." Oren turned to her, not unkindly, but with the detached focus of a man sorting components. "Why?" She swallowed. Ash Thread said he matched a root cam anomaly. Fast pattern response at Shrine Row raid. They flagged unregistered aptitude. They paid for access. Oren looked at me. "And did you?" "Did I what?" "Key, pattern read under stress during the raid. I remembered the collapsing seal gate, the way the lines had folded before the steel came down, the instinctive angle I'd taken with the bike. Yeah. He shut his eyes for half a second. Of course. I felt heat rise under my skin. Can someone explain why everyone acts like I accidentally lit a bomb? Oren pulled a metal stool around, sat, and laced his fingers together. Karen 9 runs on layered field systems. Most operators use tools they do not understand. True pattern readers, unlicensed, untagged, fast enough to work live geometry, are rare. Rare enough to be valuable. Valuable enough to be hunted. I'm not a field reader. He gave me a flat look. Kale, when you were 16, you corrected a sealed transit misroute by listening to the relay hum through a wall. You thought you were fixing bad wiring. I stared at him. You knew? I taught you to hear phase drift with a spoon on a pipe because your family was pretending you had no aptitude, and I was deciding whether to help that lie. That landed harder than I expected. Mina was watching both of us now, fever dulled but alert where it mattered. You knew he was, what, special, and nobody told him? Oren answered without taking his eyes off me. Everyone in his world tells half-truths and calls it protection. That was aimed at more people than one. I asked, what does Cindervault do with pattern readers? He hesitated, which told me enough before he spoke. Depends on the buyer, security architecture, vault breaches, counter-seal warfare, auction auditing, deep relic acquisition, sometimes live system maintenance in places where human error gets expensive. Indenture, I said. Oh, contracted captivity with legal punctuation, he said. Yes. Mina covered her eyes with one forearm. God. No one said anything for a few seconds. The lantern hiss and distant drone rotors filled the room. Then Oren stood and walked to a shelf of old analog receivers. He flicked switches, tuned a narrowband set, and fed Neris's seal stamp code into a decoder by hand. I recognized the method and almost laughed despite everything. You still use copper wire logic? I still enjoy not being hacked by children, he said. The receiver crackled. Fragments of encrypted traffic bled through, more pattern than language at first. Oren adjusted the frequency gate, listening with his head tilted. A clipped voice cut through static. Ash thread interim team failed. Subject not delivered. Basin claim window remains open. Cindervault observer on site. Escalate retrieval with civic shell if possible. Another voice. Ward station notice already seated. Violent theft, private dispute. A 1 casualty pending. Mina flinched. Casualty? Oren glanced at her shoulder dressing. They may report you dead if it helps them. She laughed weakly, then looked sick at the idea. That's efficient. He turned the dial again. More. This time the voice was smoother, probably a handler, maybe not on site. Priority remains biometric confirmation before transfer. Subject may seek low-ward technical contacts. Flag known former IEI affiliates, especially. The line dissolved in a burst of interference. Oren killed the receiver. The room got quieter in a bad way. I said, they expected me to come to someone like you. He nodded. Because someone in your father's orbit sold a profile at some point. Or Cindervault built one by inference. Either way, your habits are not as private as you hoped. My stomach tightened. That was the second trap unfolding, and I had walked into it by choosing the only person I trusted. Mina saw my face and pushed herself up on one elbow. Then leave me and move. Can you stand? Probably not, she said, but I can stop ruining your odds. I looked at her shoulder, the blood seeping through the fresh dressing, the anger and shame welded together under the fever. She had sold me. She had also stepped into a bullet and warned me about the ward shell. Both things were true. Karen 9 never gives you one clean fact when 2 contradictory ones will do more damage. Oren solved the argument for us. You are both moving, he said. This roof is burned now. The question is where? I pulled the contract sleeve back out and unfolded the salvageable section. South Basin, Pier 19. Cinder Vault observer on site by midnight. Oren's gaze sharpened. You want to go there. It wasn't a question. I heard myself say it before I had fully measured the cost. If I vanish, they keep hunting. If I run to my family, they bury it under money and call it solved. I want to know who ordered the buy. Mina stared at me like I'd lost my mind. You want to walk into the transfer? Not walk in, use it. Oren was quiet, which in him meant thinking, not disapproval. Mina shook her head and winced. Kale, they'll have frames, bonded teams, basin security paid off, probably civic warrants ready. You got lucky in a lounge. That's not a plan. She's right, Oren said. I looked at him. He continued. That is not a plan. It is motive. He moved to a cabinet and pulled out a long flat case, then another smaller one. He opened the first. Inside lay a set of field tags, analog disruptors, copper thread chalk, and 2 folding lens plates etched with old shrine patterns. My pulse kicked. He opened the second case and took out a matte black wrist cuff with no visible interface. You want Pier 19, he said. Then you go with a plan built for their assumptions, not yours. They expect a frightened courier or a hidden heir. So we give them a delivery that looks legitimate until the exact second it costs them money. That sounded like him. It also sounded dangerously close to my father. I said, You're helping. I'm old and bored, he said. Also, Cinder Vault once tried to buy one of my students out of debt detention, and I have held a grudge ever since. Mina managed a faint smile. That's almost sweet. Don't weaken in front of me, he said, and handed her a stimulant tab. Chew half. If you pass out during transit, I leave you in a shrine basket with a note. She took the tab, then he turned to me and held up the black cuff. This was built to train children from rich houses not to burn themselves on live seals. It masks micro-response spikes and spoofs baseline stress metrics for short windows. Limited charge, ugly side effects. It belonged to you once, before your father reassigned my curriculum. I stared at it. I remembered the weight on my wrist in fragments, lessons I thought were puzzles. And headaches after sessions, my father saying Oren's methods were too improvisational. You kept it? I steal from institutions I dislike. He strapped it onto my left wrist, opposite the seal burn from the restraints. The cuff tightened, then cooled. Listen carefully, he said. Your advantage is not power. It's that you understand systems and they still classify you as street grade. At the Basin, there will be 3 systems layered at minimum. Syndicate custody shell, dock authority security, and Cinder Vault verification. Each assumes the others are reliable. We break trust between them. Mina, chewing the stimulant, said around bitterness. How? Oren spread a paper map of South Basin over the table and marked 3 points. Pier 19 sits inside a bonded freight lane, officially monitored, unofficially rentable. Basin security runs drone grids and gate scans. Ash Thread handles the human transfer. The Cinder Vault sends an observer and a verifier with a portable relic reader. Probably old pattern tech, expensive and fussy. Safe system failure target is the dock verification chain. I said, if the verifier can't confirm, no transfer. Correct. If the verifier confirms the wrong thing at the wrong time, everyone starts pointing guns at each other. Mina's eyes narrowed despite the pain. You want to fake a biometric. Oren looked at her with fresh interest. You're not stupid. I'm poor, not stupid, she said. Then after a beat. Usually. He almost smiled. The plan came together in layers. Oren had cached route access to the old storm drains under South Basin from a smuggling job he refused to describe because, in his words, statute limitations are for optimists. Tavi, contacted through a dead-drop code and one prepaid favor, would get us a low-profile van and basin worker jackets no later than 2310. Mina, because she knew Ash Thread face protocols and handoff language, would coach me on how their interim team signaled status under surveillance. Oren would tune the lens plates to scramble short-range relic readings for a 6-second window if placed near the verifier's line of sight. I asked the question that sat under all of it. And if we get the name? Oren met my gaze. Then you decide whether you want justice, leverage, or war. They are not the same purchase. The city clock tones rolled the quarter hour somewhere far below. Time had started moving too fast. Mina tried standing. Her legs buckled. I caught her before she hit the table. She swore into my shoulder. Don't read into that. I'm not reading anything tonight. That's your first smart decision. We moved. Tavi returned exactly on time with a van so unimpressive it was almost elegant. Municipal gray, scuffed panels, forged drainage maintenance decals, and one rear compartment that smelled like wet cable and old bleach. He took one look at Oren and straightened like he'd walked into a ghost story. You're real, Tavi said. Oren glanced at him. Regrettably. Tavi handed me 2 worker jackets, a basin route tag, and a half-broken drone maintenance wand. This tag gets you through outer lane cameras if you don't stop moving. Inner gate scans are on human review tonight because of some council event uptown. Everyone's understaffed and angry. I blinked. How do you know that? He gave me a deeply offended look. I have ears. We loaded fast. Oren took the front passenger seat with the map and analog receiver. I drove. Mina lay in the back on bundled tarps, shoulders strapped and jaw set, giving instructions whenever pain didn't steal her breath. Tavi vanished before we rolled, after extracting 2 future favors and a promise I had no business making. The trip to South Basin was a blur of neon rain, checkpoint detours, and controlled breathing. The cuff on my wrist hummed now and then, damping the stress spikes I could feel trying to climb. Every time I thought about midnight, my hands tightened on the wheel, and the cuff cooled me by force. At the outer basin lane, the route tag worked. Camera pylon flashed amber, then green. No stop. At the second checkpoint, a bored guard stepped out, shone a light into the cab, saw Oren in a maintenance hood pretending to sleep, and waved us through after scanning the fake work order for storm drain pressure fault. Understaffed and angry, exactly as promised. By 23:31, we were under Pier 19, parked in a service alcove above the old drain culvert. Through the slats in the decking, we could see the bonded lane below. Floodlights, 2 ash thread vans, 3 security drones on lazy loops, and a portable verification tent marked with neutral commercial sigils. Neutral usually means expensive enough to rent politics. Mina, pale but fully awake now from the stimulant, peered through the slats and whispered, Ash thread team lead by the left van. Gray coat, no mask. That's Joran. He likes to look civilian. Do you know him? I asked. I know he pays late and smiles while lying. Oren handed me a cap with dock grease rubbed into the brim. Good. Remember the rhythm she taught you. Ash thread handoff phrases are less about words, more about pacing. You mirror badly, they smell a setup. Mina grabbed my sleeve before I climbed down. Kale. I looked back. Her eyes were clear now. No fever softness, no bargaining. I sold you, she said quietly. I know what that makes me. But if this goes wrong and you get one shot at surviving, don't spend it proving anything to me. There were 100 answers I could have given, most of them useless. I said, then help me make it not go wrong. She let go first. At 23:39, I walked into Pier 19 wearing a drainage jacket, carrying a tool case full of Oren's lens plates and disruptors, and acting annoyed enough to pass for municipal staff. And the first gate drone pinged my route tag and flashed an access query. I held up the maintenance wand and barked, Pressure fault under lane 6. You want flood backwash in your bonded corridor, file a delay. The drone's speaker clicked, relayed me to human review, and a tired voice cleared the gate without looking too hard. Safe systems fail fastest when overworked. Joran spotted me before I reached the verification tent. You're early, he said. I slowed, frowned like a contractor with no patience, and gave Mina's taut response cadence. Not your team. Drain pressure alert. Lane redback flagged under your temp rig. Who signed your ground bleed? Joran's eyes narrowed. He looked me over, then glanced toward the tent where the verifier was setting up. No one called maintenance. I lifted the wand, tapped the nearest floodlight housing, and let Oren's hidden disruptor pulse through the casing. 3 lights on the lane flickered out. Joran swore. I shrugged. Now they did. Ed, he snapped his fingers at one of his crew. Check the underlane channel. Fast. The crewman ran. Joran stepped closer to me. Show your order. I handed him the fake slate. He scanned it, frowned, scanned again. The forged work order would not survive deep review, but it only had to survive a stressed man with a transfer window. Behind him, the neutral verifier emerged from the tent carrying a relic reader case. Slim woman, silver gloves, no visible weapons. Cinder Vault observer, probably. She did not look at me at first. She looked at the lights, the drones, the delay clock. Then she looked at Joran. We begin in 1 minute or your client absorbs storage rollover. Money pressure. Good. Joran cursed under his breath and shoved the slate back at me. 5 minutes. Underlane only. You touch the transfer zone, I cut your hands off. Charming, I muttered, and moved toward the pier support access. As I passed the verifier, the cuff on my wrist went cold enough to ache. She had a relic reader, all right. Old design, compact housing, etched crystal face. The kind Oren warned would pick up micro-response patterns if it got a clean line. I climbed down the maintenance ladder under the pier, heart hammering. Oren's voice came through the wire bead in my ear, thin but steady. Status? Inside. Joran suspicious. Verifier on site with relic reader. Observer identity? Female, silver gloves, neutral marks. Mina's voice whispered in next, strained but focused. If it's who I think, she won't trust Ash thread numbers. She'll do her own scan. You need the 6-second scramble right as they present the subject. Copy. There was one problem. I was supposed to be the subject. Ash Thread's team had lost me. The transfer still planned to proceed within the window, which meant they had either a substitute, a stall tactic, or a second retrieval team inbound. I slid through the underlane crawl space, placed the first lens plate on a support brace aligned to the verification tent, and set the second near the flood conduit, where the relic reader line would cross. Copper chalk marks angled exactly as Oren mapped. My hands were steady. That scared me more than shaking would have. Above, boots thudded, voices sharpened. Joran. Where is the backup team? Unknown voice on comm. En route. Subject not confirmed. Use placeholder protocol if observer insists on timing. Placeholder protocol. I froze. Oren came into my ear, low and hard. Did they say placeholder? Yes. Then they plan to fake your transfer and claim chain custody later. That means the observer may be testing Ash Thread as much as the subject. We can turn that. How? Just make the verifier's reader detect a response from the wrong person. I understood it once and hated it. Joran. Exactly. I climbed back up with grease on my hands and anger in my chest, timing my return to look irritated, not urgent. At lane level, the scene had tightened. 2 more Ash Thread crew had arrived dragging a hooded figure between them. Too short, too light in build to be me, wrists bound, head down. Placeholder. A human prop to preserve a contract window. My vision narrowed. Mina's voice in my ear turned to ice. They use debtors for placeholders. If the observer doesn't care, they sell the body twice. Joran saw me and snapped, Well? I held up the maintenance wand and pointed at the tent rig. Your verifier's grounding is dirty. Line noise all over the lane. If she runs a live read now, she'll ghost half your signatures and blame the doc. The verifier looked at me for the first time with actual interest. Ghosting from where? I stepped closer to the tent threshold, keeping my left wrist angled toward the lens line and my right hand on the disruptor trigger hidden in the tool case. Underlane flood conduit, old copper backfeed, you want a clean read, kill line 3 and resync after bleed. She frowned, then checked her reader. The crystal face flashed faintly. Her expression changed by a fraction. She was seeing something she did not expect. Joran moved between us. No delays. Run it. She ignored him and lifted the reader, aiming past him toward the hooded placeholder. I thumbed the trigger. Oren's lens plates fired their 6-second scramble. The floodlights hiccuped. Drone loops stuttered. The relic reader flashed gold, then red, then locked onto the strongest pattern in the lane. Kurentot. The crystal face sang, a clean, high tone. Everyone stopped. The verifier looked from the reader to Joran, then to the hooded placeholder, then back to Joran. Her voice went flat. Why does your interim handler read response tier? Joran went white. He recovered fast. Credit where due. Interference from your cheap tent. Her gaze sharpened to a knife. Older than your syndicate. Ash thread crew shifted, uncertain. Dock drones dipped lower as their loops tried to correct. Safe systems failing in public. Joran reached for his sidearm. That was his mistake. The verifier stepped back and snapped a seal tag against the tent post. A clear field shell slammed down around her and the reader case. Not defensive panic, evidence protection. She said, loud enough for drones and cameras. Transfer suspended, interim chain compromised, possible substitution fraud. The words hit the lane like gunfire. Ash thread crew started shouting over each other. One grabbed the placeholder harder. The hooded figure cried out, a kid's voice, not an adult. Joran swung toward the nearest drone and yelled a code I didn't recognize, probably trying to force a local loop blackout. I moved before thought caught up. I drove the maintenance wand into Joran's gun wrist. The wand broke, but the metal shaft did the job. His shot went into the pier decking. I hit him again with the tool case, then grabbed the placeholder by the collar and dragged them behind a cargo post. Chaos did the rest. Dock security, already strained and now hearing substitution fraud on open lane audio, treated it like a liability event. 2 drones switched from observation to restraint mode and fired shock tethers at the biggest moving targets. Unfortunately for Ash Thread, that was their own crew fighting each other over who had authority to run. One tether hit the wrong man. Another clipped a floodlight mount. The lane dropped into alternating dark and hard white emergency beams. In my ear, Oren said, "Now leave. Name later. Leave now." The verifier's voice cut across the lane again, furious and controlled. Seal all exits. No one departs with that reader discrepancy unresolved. Too late for a clean escape. I pulled the hood off the placeholder. A teenage boy, maybe 15, split lip. Terror so total he'd gone almost silent. "Can you run?" I asked. He nodded too fast. "Good. When I say move, you follow the red pipeline under the ladder and don't stop until someone old and rude tells you to." He blinked. "What?" "Just run." Joran had recovered enough to see me through the strobing light. His face had changed. No civility left, no smile, just calculation and hate. He pointed at me and shouted, "That's him! Subject! Grab him!" So much for ambiguity. Ash Thread and Dock Security both turned at once. I shoved the boy toward the ladder and ran the opposite direction, straight through the edge of the verification tent shell as the verifier tried to re-angle her reader. The cuff on my wrist screamed cold. The crystal face flashed gold when it crossed me. Oh, her eyes widened. Not because she'd confirmed me, but because she just watched a maintenance worker light her relic reader like a live line. I grabbed the reader case handle and ripped. She held on. For half a second, we were both locked in place, inches apart, field shell buzzing around us, her silver gloves sparking at the seams. "Who are you?" she demanded. I could have lied. I was tired of lying. "Someone your client tried to buy." Joran's crew hit the tent shell from outside. The field buckled. The verifier made a decision and let the handle go. Not surrender. Choice. "Pier cameras heard my suspension," she said quickly. "Cinder Vault won't pay on this chain. If you want the claimant name, don't die in the lane. South Ledger Office, sub-level archive, code phrase, storage rollover variants, midnight plus 20, one chance." The tent shell collapsed. A drone slammed into the post beside us and exploded in sparks. I didn't thank her. There wasn't time. I took the reader case because leaving it meant losing our leverage and sprinted for the underlane ladder, while the pier dissolved into shouted commands, shock arcs, and paperwork trying to become violence. I found the boy under the red pipeline exactly where I'd pointed him, frozen and shaking. "Move," I said. We dropped into the culvert as rounds hit steel above us. Oren met us at the drain gate with Mina, a shotgun I had never seen him use, and an expression that suggested this all went slightly worse than he expected, but not enough to surprise him. He saw the reader case and raised an eyebrow. "You stole the verifier. Borrowed the machine." He looked at the boy, at Mina's face when she recognized a placeholder debtor, and then back at me. "Good," he said. "Now the city will be angry at the correct people for at least 6 minutes." We ran the storm drain while the basin alarm spread behind us. The boy's name was Ren, debt tagged from East Quarry, grabbed 3 days ago, told he was doing warehouse labor. Mina walked beside him despite her shoulder, talking him through breathing when panic spikes hit. Oren took point with the receiver and map. I carried the relic reader case and Neris's seal stamp and listened to my own pulse in the tunnels. We reached the safe relay chamber under Shrine Row at 0014. Midnight plus 20 was closing. Oren set the receiver down and looked at me. South Ledger Office sublevel archive could be a trap. "I know." Mina sat hard against the wall, pale again but steady. "It's also a real phrase. Storage rollover variance is Cinder Vault billing language for failed custody windows. The verifier gave you a door." Oren studied me. "If you go, you're done pretending. Names get exchanged in rooms like that." I looked at the reader case in my hands, at Ren curled under a blanket with dock grease on his face, at Mina pressing gauze to a wound she got stepping in front of a gun meant for me. He was right. The line was gone now. I said, "Then I stopped pretending." He nodded once. "Good. I was getting tired of the courier act." He turned to Mina. "You stay." She started to argue. He cut her off. "You are bleeding through my bandage and can barely lift your arm. If you go, you become leverage. Stay, or I sedate you and call it mercy." She glared at him, then at me. "Bring back the name." "I will." She looked away first. "If it's someone I know, I want to hear it from you, not rumors." That was as close to trust as we had left. Oren opened the relic reader case and checked the crystal face. It still held the gold flare residue from the basin. And he looked at me over the rim of his old glasses. "One more thing before you go. Cinder Vault didn't buy you because you're merely useful. They set a time transfer, layered legal shells, and risked a basin observer. That means the buyer isn't shopping for labor. They're shopping for a specific capability under deadline." I felt the weight of that settle in my bones. "For what?" He closed the case and handed it back. "That," he said, "is the question people kill to keep expensive." I left through the upper hatch into rain and neon, and the part of Karen 9 where ledger offices stay lit past midnight because money does not sleep when it's frightened. Behind me, the city was already rewriting the pier incident into reports, disputes, and denials. Ahead of me, somewhere under South Basin's archive levels, a Cinder Vault name was waiting behind a billing phrase and a door that might close the second I touched it. I had been sold once that night and almost delivered twice. And now I was walking into the buyer's records carrying their own reader in my hands. The rain hit the case and ran gold where the crystal leaked light through the seam.